All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to let a few folks filter in. I want to say welcome back to the museum. My name is Christian Davies. I'm the Dean Notes Director of Public Programs here at the Nevada Museum of Art, and this is our first in-person art bite in well over a year. I will also say it's my first in-person art bite since starting at the museum a little over a year ago. So definitely appreciate your patience if there's any hiccups. We're also doing today is a hybrid art bite. So we're streaming the program on Zoom over here, and there will be some audience interaction that we'll have during the Q&A session after Rome's presentation today. So if you see me turning to my colleague Christina over here, it's getting questions from our online audience, and I want to say hello and thank you to our Zoom audience. I should not look at them with our camera here. So today is an art bite, and the art bite is explore the Washoe ArTrail with Rome, who is our guest artist today. Before we get into some introductions and housekeeping, I'd like to begin by recognizing and acknowledging that the Nevada Museum of Art is located in the Great Basin on the occupied territories of Indigenous people. The state of Nevada consists of 27 federally recognized tribes from 4 nations: the Northern Paiute, the Shoshone, the Washoe, and the Southern Paiute people. We welcome our guest artist Rome, along with our Indigenous partners and friends who may be joining us today in person or online. A couple of pieces of housekeeping. It's been a while since we've been in the theater, so we'd ask you to go ahead and silence your cell phones, turn them on airplane mode. We'll be running about an hour. We can get to messages in a little bit. And there is going to be a Q&A session after the presentation, and the acoustics in here are great, so we won't be passing a microphone, and we'll have an opportunity to chat with our artists once their presentation is over. Today's Art Bite Lecture Series is supported by Nevada Humanities with additional sponsorship and free admission for students, supported by the Core Humanities Program at the University of Nevada, Reno. Really thank them for their support. We couldn't do these programs without their help. So the Washoe ArTrail was a multi-year placemaking project developed in partnership with the Burning Man Project and supported by Washoe County grant funding with additional support from the National Endowment for the Arts. It's a first of its kind for Northern Nevada. The ArTrail led to the creation of a rammed earth monument at Crystal Peak Park in Verdi. The trailhead symbolizes a riparian landscape of ephemerality and emphasizes the importance of and fragility of our ecosystems. This portal was informed by resident natives and was constructed by and for local resident enjoyment as an enduring testament to public space that invites, not divides, participation in the Washoe ArTrail, deepened connections with geography, history, culture, and art. The artist team known as Rome, who's joining us here today, put literal blood, sweat, and tears into this process and the construction of a reconstituted granite monument in summer of 2019. Ask any one of the 4 members, we only have 3 joining us today, but asking any of the 4 members what made this land art work possible, and they'll tell you that it's the familial bonds and lasting friendships between contemporary architect Jack Hawkins, who's joining us today, sculptor and musician Davey Hawkins, who's unfortunately traveling and won't be able to join us today, landscape photographer Scott Hinton, and geographer Kerry Rohrmeier. Each has lasting roots in Washoe County, and together they found inspiration in the Black Rock Desert and beyond, and so were compelled to build something meaningful and permanent together in Verdi. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and welcome Kerry Rohrmeier, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, thank you for coming. It's such a treat to see you all. And thank you to the Nevada Museum of Art for having us. We're very happy to be back in such a beautiful setting to talk about a work of art that we're quite proud of, and we spent many years working on to bring you this. Christian already went through the land acknowledgement, but we are also very supportive and feel like it's a representation of the project that we also built. So there are 4 artists, as the introduction implied. 3 of us are here today. you have your left brains and your right brains. And so I'm Kerry, I am a geographer, and we have Jack Hawkins, architect, Scott Hinton, our photographer, and Davey Hawkins, who recently moved to New Mexico to work at Lightning Field. The three of us, though, are residents of Washoe County and are longtime residents and very proud to be here and part of our community. If you are familiar with the ArTrail, maybe or maybe not, you've probably been to some of the sites. It started in 2017 as a Washoe County project. It is a 200-mile participatory trail. It is not marked on the ground, but you can go to the Washoe County website. There's a website devoted to the ArTrail, and you can interact. There's a story map. There's an augmented reality program in which if you visit the site, you can earn badges. But we're here to talk about the analog piece. So originally, there were two trailhead monuments to be constructed, and we're here today to talk about the first one, which is the one out in Bird Eye at Crystal Peak Park. The other work was a placemaking project meant for the Black Rock Desert out in Gerlach. That one didn't come to fruition, and we'll talk about that at the conclusion of our presentation. We're going to go in three parts today for our session. First, we're going to talk about the concept and then the construction and what led up to the construction, because believe it or not, you don't just show up with a few shovels and build a render. So we learned quite a bit about building public art from this process. And then I will close with some contemplation and reflection based on what we all have gone through now in 2020 and 2021. So I'd like to hand it off to Scott and we'll get going. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about our piece in relationship to land art and some of the concepts that we've worked on. It will be fairly quick, so I'm not going to get too far in depth into the pieces. As Kerry mentioned, Davey Hawkins is out at the Lightning Fields, and it wouldn't be a project without talking about how Lightning Fields was a representation or an inspiration for this. Davey did work for the BF Foundation for a bit of time prior to this and with Walter D. Maria. So there is a influence in the way that we were building the site and the sculpture. Working as an artist, the first place that I came to land art was through the textbook, and I throw up this kind of terrible image of Michael Heiser's double negative, which is kind of an example of how we experience land art for the first time. We don't get to spend as much time with the piece because they're quite remote. And that's something cool about the Washoe ArTrail and the portal that we built in Bird Eye, where you can actually get to it fairly easily. This is from a recent excursion I took down to double negative, which is only about 50 miles outside of Las Vegas, but it takes quite a bit of commitment to get to the actual site. And then you have to spend quite a bit of time to experience. In here, but on the other side of double negative is my car, which is about a quarter mile away, just a tiny little speck out there. So it kind of gives you an idea of scale and size. Long before I knew that I was going to be an artist or a photographer, I came across I want to say it was a Flying magazine, a picture of these people who were going out into the desert and landing at, as Richard Mizrak in this photograph talks about, an art event in the Nevada desert, which is Burning Man. And this is Croquet Machina, which is an event that they put on of moving these balls around in the desert, which then ran into a problem of them blowing away with gusty winds. So kind of an interesting influence to me as an artist, and it's kind of stuck in my brain as I've worked on this project as an influence. And then Richard Long, who is an earth artist from the UK, became prominent in my research and findings as I've gone through, and I think plays into some of the temporal qualities of land art and how things are going to decay over time in the environment. This piece right here is Dusty Boots lying in the Sahara. Robert Smithson. And I think this really gets into a place where we start to create the connection between the portal at Crystal Peak Park and some of the influences from the contemporary land artists. So Robert Smithson's Spiral Jetty out in the Great Salt Lake is a lot about how it is going to evolve over geologic time. And one of his quotes, which I've found interesting over the years, is, you know, one pebble moving 1 foot 2 million years is enough action to keep me really excited. But some of us have to simulate upheaval, step up the action. Sometimes we have to call on locus, excess, and madness. And so there's like this play between geologic time and these different earth arts or land arts built in the environment. So some of the influences from Davey Hawkins' work is this piece, which is, it doesn't reproduce, but it lasts forever, Socrates Sculpture Park in New York. And when we get to the pictures of the sculpture in Crystal Peak Park, you can see a similarity in the structure of this. This is a small monument in the middle of this art park, but it starts to tie in with the spiral and the other shapes. And so we situated the sculpture facing Ladybug Peak at Crystal Peak Park, trying to create this interaction with space. And that ties into a lot of what land artists do, is they spend a lot of time looking at the environment they're going to build in and find a unique spot that's going to work for it and place things so that they do multiple aspects. This is Nancy Holt's sun tunnels out west of Spiral Jetty, actually many dusty miles west of Spiral Jetty, and it plays on astrological time and is very simple in the first appearance, but the way that it works with the landscape is very sophisticated. And one of the things that I didn't realize when I first went there, or seeing it from the textbooks, is the way that it's lined up. It's not as a perfect cross; they're a little bit offset to really take in the different geologic features. In building the portal at Crystal Peak Park, we put a gap into the sculpture that created a sight line, which really helped connect it to the space, and then gets you their focus out onto not Crystal Peak, but onto Ladybug Peak in the distance. Another influence that we had in building this is James Trail's piece, the Rodent Crater. And a lot of this piece is based on viewing the sky, where once you're inside it, you have this space where you view up, which is on the left, and you can see the blue sky. And this, I think, ties into a lot of the inspiration of what we're looking at. This next slide is looking at the polished steel floor, which then you can see the look up at the sky. When you're inside the portal, you have a really direct view of the sky that's framed in by the walls. The sculpture on the inside is 8 feet square, and then the walls are 12 feet tall. And so you have actually some little smaller on the inside of that, but the walls are 12 feet tall. So you have a really intimate enclosure. And then you can see the striations as you go up from the Randworth building process that kind of relates back to the geologic time of Robert Smithson's work and the temporal quality. So this will weather over time. I think the Nevada environment is going to be a little harsher on it than some of the other places that they're typically built, but it's been a fascinating project to work with and to deal with the site and how we integrated the sculpture into the Crystal Peak Park. And this last view is to give a little bit of sense of the space. Like, one of the things that we did when we first went there is researched what we were looking at, where things were at. Crystal Peak is not actually viewable from the park. You have to actually get up quite a bit high and go north. So this gives just a little bit of a reference to where the proximity is to Crystal Peak, which in the center of the view is Bedlet Peak, and Crystal Peak is just a little bit south of that behind the ridge. So a lot of working with the site to figure out where best to place it and how to integrate it into that location. And so I'm going to leave it to Jack now to talk about the building process and other aspects of the portal.
Hi, it's nice to see so many faces with no masks on. I feel really lucky to be here. Feel lucky to be a part of Rome. When Kerry approached me with the concept of doing this project, here we are in northern Nevada. She's going, this is a perfect project for our group. And what ended up being the four of us. And I said, no, I'm not doing it. And she's going, yeah, you're going to do it. It's a perfect project. It's a great project for your son. And the four of us, we're gonna do it. I said, well, first of all, we're not going to get the project. We've got all these world-class artists that have been practicing with Burning Man. They've got an inside track. There's no way we're going to get this. So she said, well, we're going to do it. We're going to put in an application. We're going to respond to the RFP. So we did a design. It was really fun. I got to say, working with both Kerry and Scott, but also with our son, David. We'd never worked on anything before. I was the dad, he was the son, and suddenly we're equal partners. So that was an interesting experience working with him. We put in our RFP and we got shortlisted. And I said, well, we're not going to get it. They just shortlisted the local because but there's no way we're going to be up, 27 world-class artists. And we interviewed and we got the project. So that was the exciting part. The hard part was building it. And we had a strong concept with the piece. We wanted it to be of the earth, something that was timeless. So the rammed earth material was kind of, that led into the timelessness because it is of the earth. It's basically, the materials basically decomposed granite in our case. It can be other types of soil if you're in different parts of the country. But for us, it was pretty much decomposed granite, about 10% Portland cement, maybe we were more like maybe 5, 6, 10. I kind of wish we could put a little more in there, but 10%, and then water. And you mix it up. You mix it up with a bobcat, and then should I be cooking photos? Screw this up. Nope. Okay.
You went backwards, I think.
Sorry. Never put me in charge of technology. Backwards. We'll get to see this nice side again. Okay, keep clicking forward. Go ahead and lift it up. Okay, so this is our site. So anyway, constructing this was going to be a problem, and but we wanted this material of grandeur, and anyway, you mix it up in a bobcat, and it's hard mixing materials with precision with bobcat, but that's how you do it. And we learned from experience. We did a trial, and we experiment with full-on forms and the materials. We did pretty good. We actually did 2 prototypes. One we did at Scott's house in his front yard. That was pretty interesting, and we got our mix completely messed up. And then the second one, we had a contractor, Don Smith, who had been involved in some rammed earth projects, and he was tremendous in helping us. He hooked us up with a form company, pre-manufactured form company out of Carson City. If we had to build our own forms, this project would have completely failed for sure. So we had this pre-manufactured form company help us. go to the next one. This is our prototype down in Carson City that we did, and that was done with the pre-manufactured forms. And you can see the little form ties, the little metal pieces sticking out. But you work in a module, so we had to kind of redesign it to fit the module, and then did the work. Well, and then I'll show you. Let's see this. Okay, if I hit this again. This is the magic word. So what you mix it up, you dump it in the form, and you dump it in about 8 to 10 inches of a lift in the formwork, and then you take the pneumatic hammer and just ram till it compacts. And at first we're going, well, how do you know when it's compacted? And we found out by, you do not want to put your chin over when you're compacting, because when it's compacted, it will jump up and hit you. And we all experienced it. And Kerry's husband did it for about 5 minutes. I said, be careful, the pneumatic hammer, and he chipped his tooth. So that was an expensive, way to do it. There's the Bobcat on the right. We had a young, where were they from, Kerry? Reno High. We had some volunteers that came out. They need student service hours, and they were awesome. We put them to work, and they had fun. I think the best part was going to lunch with us. That was fun. That's actually father and son doing a little pneumatic hammering. The pneumatic hammering, as I said, you put it in 8 to 10 inch lifts, and then you ram it down to about 4 to 5 inches. And then we wanted to get this beautiful striation, which we thought would just kind of come naturally because it's a pretty organic process. No, it'll go dead level. So you actually have to force it to get a little bit of that striation. So we learned to put a little more earth in different sections to get the striations that we wanted. So it is kind of there is an artistic component to actually just putting in the dirt, which you would think that was just dumb stupid, but we learned a lot kind of on the job. I'm really glad we did our 2 prototypes, or we had a major disaster. And you can see in this photo, you can see the pre-manufactured forms, and that was interesting figuring out how to do those. And the other thing I was going to say in this photo, you can see the rebar. It does have reinforcement in it. We had to meet. Nevada doesn't have a building code for rammed earth, but I think New Mexico had one. And so our structural engineer used the code from New Mexico for rammed earth. So it does have reinforcing, vertical and horizontal. And so as we went up, we had to add vertical and horizontal. And we had to lap them properly like you would, just like a concrete wall, basically. In fact, rammed earth is really like, everything's done pretty much like a concrete, if you were doing a concrete wall. It's just when you pull the forms off, you get a really, really beautiful finish. And then what I was going to say, the height of this thing, it gets logistically more difficult the higher you get, because you have to get the earth up there. We could barely, the last lift we did, we had to pour buckets in. We'd have buckets of our material, we'd forklift, or we'd bucket it up on the Bobcat, and then we have to lift it in, which was pretty exhausting. I was glad to get back in the office after this project. And then this is the last, we did this, this was a Paiute saying from the tribe that actually once lived on the property. We tried to be really respectful. We worked with the tribe. They were fantastic to work with. They were thrilled to be included in the process. They were probably one of our best stakeholders. And they were thrilled with this, that we had sandblasted in by a local, or Carson City engraver came out, and he normally does tombstones, but he engraved this into the side of the rammed earth. And it is the home of my mother's sister, which we really loved, and they loved it. They actually picked it, which was fantastic. And then these are just some drawings. We had to take it seriously, like engineered structure. We had a structural engineer. I got to do the architectural work for it, which was interesting, being my own architect for my own construction project. Oh, this is that's, I'll let it go. Come on. So I've got a couple of funny stories. We had a little bit of a mistake when we were putting the slit in. See in that picture, as we got up higher and higher, we had a well, I'll call it a wooden form that we had built to keep that slit. And the first halfway up was no problem. It stayed true. As we got up higher, the second one moved. It started moving. I don't know how we did it, but it got off a little bit, and we couldn't tell until it was too late. And our son, David, said, "This is unacceptable. We got to rip it out and get that perfectly vertical." And I said, "Okay, you start to dig this out, see what you think." And it's like concrete. It really is. It's amazing when you compress this material with just a little bit of Portland cement and water, it becomes like concrete. And he went with a shovel and couldn't. I said, "It's done." And he's going, "This is completely unacceptable." And I said, "Well, we're not tearing it out. We got to keep moving forward." And he goes, "What is wrong with you? You've been OCD my entire life. And the one time I want you to be on the same page with me, you throw your OCD out the window." And so I said, "Well, let's just get it done. If it's really noticeable, I can get a general contractor who's a friend of mine that will come out and saw cut the slit, and it'll be perfect." So he relinquished. We kind of, fought it out, and he said, "All right, I'll agree with that." And we pulled the forms off, and you couldn't tell. It was just enough. It was, when we were up close to it, it was really noticeable, but overall, you couldn't tell. So I didn't have to get my contractor to come out and saw cut it. And we had one other interesting story. The mirror finished floor, so that's a piece of stainless steel, mirror finish, was originally supposed to go wall to wall. And we had to make this ADA compliant too. So somebody could come up in a wheelchair and go inside and experience just like an able-bodied person could. So it had to be ADA compliant. So that gave us our inside dimensions. But the mirrored floor was originally supposed to go all the way to wall. Well, when I went to get the mirror floor, it comes in sizes. You have to work with, well, I should say you could get a custom size, but our budget didn't allow for a custom size. So it was either wall-to-wall floor with a seam in it, which I thought was an acceptable solution. So I tell David this, and he goes, "Completely unacceptable. We cannot have a seam in the floor." And I hope he gets to see this. So I said, "Well, that's all we got. We don't have the money to do a custom floor, and it's going to have to be seamed." He said, "No, we're not going to seam it." And I said, so it was a design problem that we had to both solve that we were acceptable. So what we decided was to not seam it and keep one piece and then do something at the perimeter, which actually ended up being a better solution than if we had had it go wall to wall. So it's those kind of processes. You're in the heat of the moment. It's got to be solved. We had to build this in a 10-day period. There was no flexibility, and we had to solve it. And what was fun for me was to have those conflicts and then solve them. And we did it on multiple. I'm just giving you 2 examples. We did this on multiple times with these 2 guys as well. But to be able to solve problems creatively and then actually end up with a better result. So that was really part of the best part of the project for me was those problem solving. We did submit it for a design award. We won a Northern Nevada AIA award, and we're going to submit it for a state AIA, American Institute of Architects award this fall too. So keep your fingers crossed for us.
You can see it's really a piece of architecture, and we had gone into this thinking we were building some public art, but none of us had ever done that before, with the exception of Davey, who had some experience, but the three of us were just totally naive. I like to think that we could come up with some Scott. In fact, he found the RFP and sent it to me. And then, as Jack mentioned, I'm pretty determined. I was not taking no for an answer. We are doing this. We are going. There's nobody else who's a geographer, artist, architect from Washoe County who I thought had the combination of skill set to really make something meaningful. So we did get the project, and that was October. We submitted in October 17, and we found out it was just about spring break, March 2018, when we got kicked off on the project. We had long been friends. I should tell you that Jack and Scott and I have been friends for more than 1 decade, 2 decades now going. We camped at Burning Man together, so we knew Dusty, we knew heat, we knew how to build shade structures. We thought, you know, we had this in the bag, but we had never really gone through a process that was involving the National Endowment of the Arts, working with Washoe County as our own clients. I had been a planner, Jack's an architect. We had submitted many building permits, but never really doing it for our own work. So this was very much a learning process. And because we got in so early, I think one of the biggest challenges is the county was figuring it out while we were figuring it out. So they were still picking the sites for the ArTrail. They were still defining the project that we had already been scoped to build the one, well, we've been scoped to build 2 trailheads, but in doing that, Scott and I did a lot of the digital component of the project while Jack and Davey were working on the analog, actually piece on the ground. And so there was a lot of time spent outside of what you see in the 10 days of construction. We didn't finish until mid-October when the landscaping was done and the etching on the wall. So we had spent over 2 years and considerable amounts of money. But we did get to do some really great ride-alongs. We got to meet a lot of the partners, including the tribal partners, the Paiute people and also the Washoe people, and engage them in the process. So those are some of my favorite sites on the ArTrail, which is 10 sites, and the furthest most piece being out of Gerlach. But it's not there right now, so we'll get to that in a moment. Let's just take a minute to celebrate what we do have as cultural and archaeological and art assets in Washoe County. It's a very special place. Okay. So I'd like to thank our partner at Washoe County, Gabrielle Enfield. She was grants administrator. She really helped manage the project from the county's perspective, who really took the lead on this. It was a 2-year grant and we got a 1-year extension. We had a partner at Burning Man Project, and Joe Shedek was our civic arts contact. Originally, we thought we were getting into this with equal partnership. Burning Man, I have a lot of respect for Burning Man. I did some graduate research out there. They ended up being more of a feedback mechanism and less of an engaged partner. But the county really made sure to see this project through. They donated time and resources to do some of the construction around the base. So the foundation work, the path leading up to our art piece, the county stepped up and donated that, as well as the landscaping, which is native vegetation. There were also City of Reno, City of Sparks. They had some input throughout the process. I'd say my big takeaway for any of you who want to do something like this and won't take no for an answer is you spend 95% of your time behind the screen. So you've all probably been well, we're trained for the last year, but sending emails, trying to engage partners. I did a ton of inviting, my goodness. I was constantly trying to recruit people to come help us, trying to organize things. I spent more time doing that than I did rounding earth, which these guys will probably tell you I got the easy end of the stick. But it actually, when we got out there, we were able to get some leadership students, but for the most part, when you make a call to action in August, when it's 95 degrees for volunteers, don't expect anyone to show up. The county's role was much more about engagement, and so probably my biggest challenge with this project and what I reflect on most is that the county took the responsibility for doing the story circle information sessions that informed the design, and they were responsible for setting up the outreach events. And by dividing that from the artist team, I feel like our engagement wasn't as rich as it could be, or wasn't as full as it could be. And reflecting on 2020 and all that we've learned about structural inequality and pandemics and the confluence of crises that we've now experienced, I feel like building public art, that this needs to be at the forefront. And it isn't just about the privilege that I enjoy and that my teammates have benefited from, but really about that portion of doing the design work up front. So I would say, in reflecting back on a year and a half, I think it's very important that the artist team is the initiator of the engagement process going forward. And our work by contract or original concept is only half done. Time and money being what it was, COVID came, our project sort of died on the vine. So the Gerlach piece will never be built as we designed. And I always felt like it was the more magnificent, it was larger in scale and scope, and it had a view out to the actual Black Rock on the playa, a real nod to Burning Man, which is what brought us together and excited us about this project originally, is incomplete. So while we might not be part of the second phase, and maybe there never will be, I strongly encourage anybody who has the initiative and desire as part of the Burning Man 360 property plan, or as part of maybe this museum, I encourage a group of other people to try to make this happen. I would love to experience the desert in this way and see the art trail through as having a beginning and distinct end. This was our original design. It was close to 60 feet in length and at 1.14 foot walls, and they were even slightly tilted parallel to one another with a steel floor and lighting and some etchings in the steel that would be informed by residents. The community out there was not so keen on the design, and that was one of the reasons it didn't go forward. The county was not able to select a site or secure land to build it. So time just went on and too many challenges got in the way. So we finished early, so to speak, but you know, the desert is a canvas for other creative ideas, and I really hope to see it or some form or fashion someday. So this is all we came to present for now, but we're here for Q&A. I really appreciate your time. I'm so thankful for not only my friends and colleagues, but all of the people who helped us. This was a long process. For what you saw for 10 days took years of our life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott, Jack, and Kerry. I'm going to ask you guys to join us up here and turn on some microphones and do a little bit of Q&A. Well, me and Michael will be plenty of time here. I want to say thank you to our Zoom audience who's hopefully still with us and is able to hear and watch along. I guess my first question, I'm going to start just by opening this up with, you know, when I look at the site, and I've been out to the site, and I look at the piece, it's for me, it's like a series of sort of scaling perspectives. There's an intimacy that's built into the landscape, and it's then built into the piece itself as you approach it and enter the portal itself. And I guess, adjust the camera to see our guests. Sorry, we're new to this hybrid thing, and I'm sure that, yeah, we can see everybody, great. So So there's scaling of intimacy as you move in, and I guess my question, and it referenced a little bit, and this is a great image to talk about this, is what is the long-term plan as far as the landscaping? I know there was reference to indigenous landscaping, and how is that gonna kind of add and contribute to this? If you could speak to the immediate surrounding space around the portal.
I think I can answer that. So there is a difference in scale. It is at the entrance of the park. So we wanted it to read that as sort of an entry statement, so that when you drive up, because before that, you really didn't know where the park sort of began. There's sort of this upper parking lot. So we did want it to be sort of a monument saying, hey, you're at the park. This is part of the beginning of the ArTrail. But then if you, and then also a lot of bikers and hikers go by there. So we wanted that to read for them. But then also, if you took the time to go up to the sculpture, there are several surprises. One being the mirror floor, and we call it poor man's James Terrell, which Scott alluded to. We have some, there's a local rock that is native to Nevada called hematite that we found. It's in one of the walls. We would let it read through the striations in around her, and so that's kind of a surprise. And then just the etching, you do see that from the road, but as you get up closer, you can see it etched into the parameter. So there's some nice surprises. And then also, as you walk, as you get closer to the sculpture, it is oriented on the, it's actually not the highest peak, but it's the most prominent peak that you see from that portion of the park, and that's Ladybug Peak. And so it does have a very specific orientation. It is anchored to its site, both on an axial relationship to the mountains, but also just of the earth, and then just kind of representing the entry to the park, or also the beginning or end of the ArTrail. So hopefully that answers that.
Yeah, and then, so I guess the second part of that is, can we expect, is there vegetation in 5 years? What's it gonna look like?
So that's a really good question. So yeah, the second part of that is we do have we had a landscape architect that volunteered her time. That's Barb Sanders, which was Stantec. She's one of the best landscape architects in our area, and she was kind enough to do the work for us. And we wanted native vegetation. It does sit sort of there's a nice berm that it has a layering effect of the vegetation, and the sculpture itself wants to sit in a sea of horsetails. You know what horsetails are? They grow along the Truckee River. They're native. They do take a fair amount of water, but that was the one place we kind of splurged. The rest of it's very irrigation friendly or water friendly. But so hopefully we've got them started. They do propagate on their own, so we're hoping in maybe 5 years that the sculpture does sit in the sea of horsetails.
Like, well, let's hope for a wet winter,
Yeah.
for many droughts,
Droughts.
but also for these horsetails. Do we have any questions from the audience? Just go ahead and like raise a hand, yeah.
Part of your RFP, did you do the design to get the RFP, or did you just do it off credentials?
I'll tell you that I was pretty insistent, like many things. I said, I woke up in the middle of the night, brand dirt, I love brand dirt, and the first response is, that's not in northern Nevada. I said, but it should be. And so our climate, there was a lot of consideration put into whether we could build brand dirt here. We have an example saying we can, but it took a lot of research. We put a lot in the front end in the RFP, not only demonstrating how we complied with the 10 principles, or we thought about intentionality, but also did a lot of architecture up front. So it was a pretty costly experience, well worth it in terms of personal value. But I didn't mention this, but I also convinced my colleagues here that we were going to take no income from this. And I don't know that we thought 3 years of work would go into that, but that was part of the project.
Great, well, so we have a question coming in from our Zoom audience. And as a reminder for all of our Zoom audience, if you have a question, use the Q&A feature. I guess they can't see me on camera anyway, but use the Q&A feature and we're going to get those questions in as well. Emma from our Zoom audience is asking, and this is a great question, what does Rome stand for? How did the name of this foursome come together?
Oh, it doesn't, it's not an acronym for anything. We're just kind of nomadic people, so we're constantly getting in our cars, going exploring. Nevada is wonderful for that. We just kind of picture ourselves as roamers, I suppose, on the landscape, but with a critical eye.
In the very back, yes.
Thank you. What a beautiful project. I look forward to visiting it. The coloration of the walls, do you anticipate any changes in that color?
No, I mean, it will patina, it definitely, we have some erosion, a little bit of erosion here and there, which we actually like. It's meant to kind of deteriorate over time, but the color will stay pretty much as is. It's uglier, and we did have to work a little bit. We actually wanted some variegation in the color, and that's actually harder to get than you would think. But we experimented with that a little bit, and we were really happy with it. Well, I should say, we were terrified when we went to, we had the county coming in. We were on like day 9, we had one day to kind of finish up, and we were ready to pull the forms off. But we had the county coming in the first thing in the morning, and we all said, we've got to see what this thing is really gonna look like, because it's like a Christmas present, right? You're just keeping your fingers crossed that you don't have some big giant pockets that, like a real disaster. Or I had a dream, I don't know, it was either I had it or David had it, I can't remember, that when the forms got pulled off, the whole thing was gonna just collapse. And so it was the night before the county was coming to take a look at it. We pulled the corner off of the forms, and it was just so beautiful. The materials, and when you touch it, it actually feels like polished granite or polished concrete. It feels really beautiful, and just the texture and the colors were super happy. But we were terrified when we pulled those forms up.
And we sourced our decomposed granite up in Golden Valley at a local earthworks supplier. But what you do see of rammed earth a lot of times are dyed soils, and this has absolutely no dye. So we were very impressed with the natural color.
We had a fight over that too.
Oh, yeah.
This one wanted color. We said, we are not dyeing that earth.
Well, you've got a lot of level care. If it's not colorful when you take it off, and like Jack said, you just don't know until you take the forms off.
So I'm intrigued by the trial runs. I think that's always kind of like a pilot of like, okay, this is the test flight. Was it moisture content? Was it the, because there's obviously, an art to putting together, the slurry and the mixing, and there's a lot of variables. But, can you maybe elaborate on that, what the takeaway was on those pilot projects?
Yeah, Scott was very integral and spent a lot of time doing the actual sourcing of materials. I went to a couple of different places, but he did a lot of just small cylinders experimenting. And I'll let you get to that.
My neighbors probably think I'm strange because I'd be out there like pounding some sand and water and cement into different plastic pipes or forms. But it was really, the mixture of the water was really important in getting it right. And then the amount of cement. So there was a lot of tests that we did with too much cement where it would go from this nice golden color into a cement gel light color. So we worked a lot with that. And then the other thing, which was working with Black people, the geotech company, was how you mix the materials together. I think I started out mixing like everything together, thinking, oh, this is gonna be like great, it's like mixing a pie or something or a cake. But the way that you mix the water with the cement became really integral. So what they started doing was mixing that decomposed granite with the cement and then adding the water to it. and then making sure that the water wasn't hot because they were cured too fast. So there was a lot of trial and error, as Jack said, and then figuring that out. And then you take it to the Holt or the Bobcat, and it's a whole different thing. It's like, okay, so 1 bag of cement, and here's the water, and here's how much decomposed granite to put in. So it was a cool trial and errors.
You know, scaling it up from like from our prototypes to full scale, that took some experimenting too. But it's amazing how without, you know, precision, I mean, we had ratios, but it wasn't super precise, but you know, like the guys, when we were doing the pneumatic work, you know if the mix is wrong. You could go, hey, too much water in the last mix, or not enough water in the last mix, and we really got it. By the time we finished, we were really getting pretty good at it. It was definitely, you know, some trial and error. And it wasn't that it had to be perfect either. It just would work better if you had the right water content or the right concrete to dirt mix. It's definitely an experiment.
So thinking about materials and this you know, the process of getting the mixture just right, and then also thinking about the placemaking nature of the piece as a whole, and the trail as a whole. I'm curious about the project that will always be a big question, which is the final portal out of the Black Rock Desert. And was the intention there or the plan to use, instead of decomposed granite, which is more reflective of the entry into the canyon in Bird Eye, was the plan to use a mixture of playa dust and to see that different coloration and reflection of the place as you made a smaller place, again, you know, that sort of scaling perspective there.
It would have been beautiful.
So the plan was to use playa.
We had hoped to use soil right from the site, just to be immediate to the place, but just in working with geotechnical engineers and things, we learned quickly that we had to source materials that we could, we would know would be secure public safety working in county. So.
And the playa materials, I did some tests with that, and it fell apart really fast because you have to overmix it with cement.
So it becomes more heavy on the cement side than the actual representative like soil mixture of the playa itself.
Correct.
It seems so hard, sometimes unbreakable.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting way that it works. The site that we were looking at had a lot of decomposed granite in it, so we might have been able to source materials from one of the sites that we were working with, but we won't know that until. Yeah.
So there. Any questions? Yes, right here.
Your form manufacturers, did they get to come out and see the piece? The guys that actually made the forms?
That's a really good question. We did have a couple of their people come out, and the guy that I worked with there was terrific. It's Simon's Forms out of Carson City, and they're actually a national company. They're based in the East Coast, but they moved their facility out west. And I did invite the guy that I worked with, was the manager in the office. I did invite him out. I don't know if he ever came to our open house out there or not. So they were great. They really helped us a lot. We could not have done about it.
In the, let's go over here. Yes.
I was just curious to mention that what is the translation?
Oh, it is the home of my mother's sister, which we love.
Which referred to the place, there was a washer truck settlement right in that location. So.
If I may, the purity of it is just, it's very honest, and the columns are, you know, just appropriately scaled, and they're very, you know, just seems to make sense. As a designer team, did you look at the very top part of it and say, do I need to bedlet? Do I need to worry about the moisture running off? You know, is there some opportunity to, you know, kind of, you know, what does that start to look like? Did that maybe go through your thought process on that?
It did. We decided, and it's changed. Originally, we were going to do a steel, Corten steel top, and we were going to let it just hang over the rammed earth just a little bit. And I really, at this point, I think it just became too logistically difficult. We weren't comfortable with it. I think Don Smith that we worked with, who had built some rammed earth, he wasn't too keen on it. We ended up just capping with concrete, just to help you preserve it more than anything. And that was kind of that was just kind of a design process, thought process, I guess. And we did think about, you know, how best to cap that and finish it. It does have a fishing lure at the top.
I was gonna ask what other Easter eggs there is a fishing lure there.
There is. So my father had passed away the day before we started to build this. And I already had said my goodbyes, so I wasn't going to fly back. Originally from Missouri. And so Kerry came to me and said, why don't you do something nice for your, you know, as a memorial for your father? And so, sorry, I talked to our son about it. I had no fishing lure for my dad. So it sits in the concrete. It's half in and it's half out. And it represents the physical leading to the ephemeral. So it means a lot.
I think we have time for one more question. I'm going to ask really quickly before we get to this last question. It just as an anchor myself, what's the name of the word?
It's a propeller.
Okay.
And that hence that there were blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the very back, yes.
As it relates to experience, I'm thinking about when should I go visit it? I'm just curious what your experience has been spending time there. Morning, midday, nighttime, stars. Do you have anything to share with us as it relates to experiencing it there?
So at the time we were building this, I moved to the Bay Area and I really missed Nevada, watching it at sunset. And just when the weather is so beautiful in the summer here and the sunset and the sky just turns pink, to me is the perfect time.
It's cool in the snow.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think seasonally would probably be pretty fantastic to watch it over the seasons, especially in Verdi, where you might get a little bit more snow. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming out today and joining us for, again, our first in-person art fight in over a year. There's definitely more coming up this summer. It's great to see your masks and faces. Thank you to our Zoom audience who stuck with us online. You can look forward to more hybrid programs. So if you're not able to make it to the museum, you can watch from home. And a huge thank you to Rome. Wish we had Davey with us today, but it was fantastic to have you join us and to hear about this project. I encourage everybody here to go out to Crystal Peak Park in Verdi and experience this piece, maybe at sunset. If you see one of your fellow audience members, you can say hello. And again, thank you to the core humanities program, University of Nevada, Reno, as well as Nevada Humanities for sponsoring this program. And we look forward to seeing you again next month. Thanks, everybody.